Matt, thank you for that live report. Our team coverage now turns to the impact a pause on federal grants and loans would have on the farming community.
Western Mass News reporter Reagan Lokri joins us live in studio after speaking with Massachusetts Congressman Jim McGovern. Reagan?
Yeah, that's right, Abby and Chris. Along with the Congressman, we also spoke with community involved in sustaining agriculture, or CISA. Along with funding, they tell us the Trump administration's level of mass deportation could have dire effects on agriculture across the country. Congressman Jim McGovern represents several of the farming communities here in Massachusetts, like Northampton, Hadley, and Amherst. McGovern says a pause on federal funding would have huge impacts on farmers, especially those in western Massachusetts seeking disaster relief funding from the severe flooding we saw in 2023.
I don't think Donald Trump and the millionaires and billionaires that he surrounds himself with even understand how difficult it is to farm, and especially in New England, but in this country, how much hard work is required.
As of Wednesday afternoon, the memo to pause federal grants and loans has been rescinded, but farm workers are not in the clear just yet. McGovern says another Trump-era policy is still threatening our agricultural system.
The agricultural industry nationwide is largely dependent on immigrant labor and undocumented immigrant labor.
The mass deportations we've seen in President Trump's first days back in office are a cause for concern for Claire Morneau, communication manager for community involved in sustaining agriculture, also known as CISA. Morneau tells us this could impact our entire nation's food supply. She tells us the number of undocumented people working on farms in Massachusetts is not very robust, but it's a fact that migrants, both legal and otherwise, make up a huge portion of our country's agricultural system.
The reasons for that are complicated and long when you think historically, but are certainly related to U.S. policy related to agriculture and immigration over generations.
Meanwhile, Representative McGovern believes that we need to fix our immigration system and secure our borders. However, he says this is not the solution.
Everybody agrees that, people commit violent crimes should not, should not be in this country. But the overwhelming vast majority of migrants who are here, respect the law and help our communities grow economically and contribute a great deal to our communities.
McGovern adds that most immigrants in agriculture, at least here in Massachusetts, are working in the U.S. legally under a visa program. Reporting live in studio, Reagan Lokri for Western Mass News.
Reagan, thank you for that live report. And our team coverage on the Trump administration's budget office memo that would have froze federal loans and grants continues.